Hidden deep in Central America lies a name we never forget. Not a country, not a city, but a gang. MS-13. For decades, that name has been etched into the streets of Los Angeles, echoed through El Salvador's prisons, and whispered in the nightmares of law enforcement around the globe. But to really understand MS-13, you can't start at a crime scene. You must go further back, to the battlefield, to the factories of chaos where it was forged. A homeland in flames, a flood of refugees, and a world that met them with hostility instead of hope. Born amid shadows in the 1980s Los Angeles, MS-13 wasn't forged to conquer, it was made to survive. But from survival, something darker emerged, something more ruthless, something born of pain and driven by rage. In this video, we'll peel back the layers to reveal how a street survival group transformed into a criminal empire, built not merely on crime, but on loyalty, terror, and blood. This is not just a story about violence, it's a story about power, how a people cast out by society created their own dominion, and how that dominion extends even behind bars. Welcome to the rise, the reach, and the reality of MS-13, the most dangerous gang in America, and perhaps the world. If you're drawn to stories that reveal shadows beneath the surface, beyond the headlines, make sure you hit like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to see the world we usually ignore. The saga of MS-13 begins here, and it only gets darker from this point on. To understand how such a violent force came into being, you don't begin at a jail cell. You begin at the brink of a war zone. El Salvador, 1979, a nation no larger than Massachusetts, caught in the sweeping crossfire of Cold War politics. Leftist rebels rose against a US-backed military dictatorship, plunging the country into over a decade of conflict. Entire villages turned to ash, more than 75,000 lives erased. But the real devastation? It followed survivors across borders. Between 1980 and 1990, nearly 500,000 Salvadorans fled to the US with nothing but trauma and no safe harbor waiting for them. They landed in some of the most dangerous neighborhoods in Los Angeles: Pico Union, South Central, MacArthur Park, where poverty, violence, and racial tension were already raging. What happens when war-scarred youth arrive in a place that sees them as threats? Rejected by schools, beaten in the streets, ghosted by justice, they had no protector. So they created one. They formed Mara Salvatrucha, not a cartel, not an empire, a brotherhood, a tribe of displaced souls who tattooed their pain, crafted rituals, and turned streets into their battlegrounds. Trauma doesn't fade, it adapts. From the ashes of civil war, MS-13 was born, not to terrorize, but never to be terrorized again. But protection would quickly turn into domination. What began as defense didn't stay that way. By the late 80s and early 90s, MS-13 had evolved. They recruited, organized, and expanded. These members were war survivors, battle-tested in more ways than one. They didn't just fight to survive, they fought to dominate. Machetes replaced guns. Beheadings replaced beatings. They adopted brutality as strategy. Their chilling motto, mata, viola, controla, kill, rape, control. Not a slogan, a battle plan. But the spotlight draws attention. In 1996, the US made a sweeping change. Deport any non-citizen who commits a crime, no matter how minor. Thousands of MS-13 members were sent back to El Salvador, a country they barely remembered. What America thought was removing criminals became an invasion force. When they landed, they didn't return home. They returned to conquer. Many were children when deported, with no language, no family, no job. Yet they came with an identity, MS-13. Without reintegration efforts, El Salvador watched helplessly as these returnees regrouped. They fused hate with strategy, trafficking tactics from the US into local networks. Neighborhoods became territories. Streets became front lines. El Salvador? It became a stronghold. The gang organized under La Ranfla Nacional, a secretive council that governs from hidden rooms and prison cells. A cartel disguised as a gang, managing hits, drug routes, extortion rings, and even influencing politicians. By the early 2000s, MS-13 wasn't surviving. They were thriving. They controlled schools, buses, city streets, even political corridors. Their message was clear: obey or disappear. And that forced a grim question. How do you fight an enemy that recruits faster than you arrest? MS-13 didn't stop at El Salvador's borders. Its roots deepened. Its branches grew. Fast, far, and without mercy. The gang harnessed extortion in El Salvador, multiplied weapon and cocaine pipelines throughout Honduras and Guatemala, ran human trafficking and contract killings in the US. But the most terrifying detail? They were decentralized. Dozens of cliques operating independently under a brutal code of silence. Law enforcement could cut off one head, only for 3 more to spring in its place. What fueled this growth? Recruitment. For MS-13, fresh blood was essential. They offered money, status, protection to vulnerable youth. But loyalty came with cost. Violence to prove worth, sometimes a beating, sometimes murder. And leaving? That was not an option. Any ex-member brave enough to speak on record will tell you, leaving MS-13 is a death sentence. By 2008, they were in over 42 US states. By 2017, the Justice Department labeled them a top-tier national threat. But how do you stop an organization that uses deportation to evolve, that thrives in chaos? How do you dismantle a network born from exile, forged in violence and spread like wildfire? Even structure can be weaponized. MS-13 isn't a neighborhood crew. It's a warrior syndicate. At its apex sits La Ranfla, a council of hardened leaders, many imprisoned but still in command. Orders cascade across borders. Power isn't given, it's earned in blood. Initiation is brutal. For boys, it's violence. For girls, sexual abuse. Then a 13-second beating with no tears, no hesitation. Survive and get marked, sometimes tattooed. But the tattoos are fading. Once proudly displayed, they now are hidden. Faces shaved to vanish, yet the violence endures. One misstep, talking to police, showing vulnerability, dating the wrong partner, it's a ticket to death. Often by machete, always public. No mercy, no appeal. Still, for many, it is not just a gang, it's family. When society failed you, your home broken, school abandoned, future erased, what do you cling to? MS-13 offers identity, purpose, belonging, even if it demands blood in and blood out. So we have to ask, what world does this make of us when violence becomes the most stable structure for survival? Why 13? It's not random. It's a symbol, a code linking MS-13 to La M, the Mexican mafia. M is the 13th letter. That bond is their pact. But how did a Salvadoran gang align with one of the most feared prison syndicates in US history? In the early years of MS-13, they needed protection behind bars. In California prisons, La M ruled the yards. In return for respect and tribute, MS-13 got sanctuary, a partnership born of convenience, sealed in blood. This alliance elevated MS-13 from Barrio Street fighters to sanctioned warriors. That's why 13 matters. Mess with it and you'll bleed. But it wasn't just symbolism. It was supply lines, drug routes, extortion income. MS-13 split into dozens of cliques, each operating on its own, but united under a single brutal code. La M stayed tucked in the shadows, collecting dues, quelling disputes, enforcing order. So next time you see MS-13 tagged on a wall, it's not graffiti. It's a contract, a warning, a vow. Tread lightly. 13 is a blood oath. So what started as survival became a hurricane. MS-13 rose from war and separation, but what it built wasn't refuge. It was a tempest, sweeping across LA, across borders, across generations. We're just beginning to unmask how one group turned exile into empire. Because no one chooses to become a monster. Most are shaped by the world around them. In our next episode, we'll expose the twisted codes, the hidden rituals, and the dark networks that made MS-13 survivor to sovereign. And if you feel that pull to keep searching, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. so you never miss a step in our journey to uncover what still hides on this earth. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.